So I just want to say hi again to everyone. And this is, I want to introduce Kyra Climbingbear. She's an awesome woman. As you all know, throughout this 6-week program, we've had guest speakers who, kind of can enlighten the squad members that we have here in terms of professionalism, paths to take career-wise, and just basically, how life can look for you regardless of what path you want to take. And I think that Kyra is a wonderful example of I almost, I battle with whether or not I want to call you unconventional, just because, the things I know about you on a personal level. I struggle with whether or not I want to say you live an unconditional life, an unconventional lifestyle, or whether or not you just live a life that you created and cultivated and molded for yourself. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's unconventional because it's unique.
So
I just think it's unique.
For me, I always say untraditional.
Untraditional. Okay.
I'm not a traditional student. I'm, a late bloomer in so many other spaces. So for me, I would say it's unconventional. I would say it's definitely not the norm, but I mean, unfortunately and fortunately, a lot of us don't have that same upbringing that a lot of other students have, especially, when it comes to non-minorities of color. So most of us don't have the same luxury of going straight from high school right into college and then finishing. We just don't. We don't have those same privileges. So for me, regardless of my privilege or circumstance, and I'm sure you can attest to this, when it comes down to being a person of color, you just don't have that option. When it comes down to being a woman, you don't have that option. So, whether you had children early in life or later in life, you just go with whatever God got for you.
So, tell us a little bit about your story. And because, I was first introduced to you as a Facebook friend, an artist. And, I turned around one day, first of all, you had a kid, and then you had another kid, and then you had another kid. And It's like the baby making machine. Then the next thing I knew, you were in freaking law school. And I said, wow, Kyra's going to be a lawyer. I always knew you as an artist. So just give us a little bit of a backstory about, your route and how your life has kind of evolved, and it's still evolving.
So, I'm Kyra Climbingbear. I'm currently a judge, which is so crazy to even still say that. It's so weird. If you can see my whole setup here, I have this little fake office thing that I made, and it's unconventional as well. But my mother is just a regular, she's not regular, actually. My mom's pretty awesome. My mom is, her family's from Alabama and from Louisiana. And my mom's the first to go to college. And then she actually graduated from Columbia University. And she is a therapist. And then my father is Native American. He is a electrician for our tribe, which is the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in Cherokee, North Carolina. And that was a pretty unconventional relationship. But I mean, the blessing is that I was born from it. So just growing up in those two different cultures and being very connected to both of them, I never really wanted to go to college. Never thought that I would be pursuing the same role as my mom. I thought my mom was always really uptight. I felt like the more education you get, the worse you are as far as being detached from certain communities. And it just wasn't for me. So I always wanted to be an artist. I always wanted to sing. I never really liked school like that. I always liked to write poetry and just kind of daydream. And so having my first child at 21, being married at 20, I didn't really have a childhood. I didn't really have my 20s. And so I did the whole artist thing for years. And it was awesome. It was dope. It was a dope experience. I don't regret any of those life choices. It led me here. When I was actually preparing for writing for my admittance letter, or whatever it's called. I can't even think right now. It's too early, and I haven't had coffee yet. But when I was writing my statement to apply for law school, I just kind of went back into a space of Twitter days. And a Native American student that was going to Harvard reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, are you Kyra Climbingbear?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like the Kyra Climbingbear. I'm like, "There's only one Kyra Climbingbear in the entire world. Trust me, I'm the only one." And she's like, "Did you write the song Champion?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, I just want to say thank you. And I'm like, "For what?" And she's like, I'm in law school. It's really, really hard. I hate it here. And, last semester I was going to kill myself. And one of my friends gave me your CD. They had gone to like a Native American basketball tournament, and I was just giving my CDs out. And she's like, I listened to that song, and she's like, you really inspired me. I could feel your intensity in the song. It was very reminiscent of Billie Holiday. And I was just like, are you for real? Like, I was just like, nah, she's bugging. And so she's like, no, she's like, I really just want to tell you, thank you. Like, you encouraged me, you kept me going. And she's like, I listen to your song every day for the semester. And she's like, it's what got me pumped. And so as I wrote that, for my own admittance into law school, I just thought about how powerful our word is, how powerful our experience is. And it's not ours, it's the universe. We were created in love, we were created for a purpose. And sometimes our purpose is not what we originally think. And then, we have to adjust. Either we evolve with that purpose, or we stay complacent and we either don't finish it or don't fulfill that purpose. Either way, for me, once I realized how strong or powerful my words were, I realized that I was possibly in the wrong arena. Like, if my words matter so much, then singing only has but so much longevity. And really, what is my purpose? What is my calling? And some would say I like to argue. I don't. I actually don't like confrontation. I enjoy being right. Sometimes I enjoy not being right. But more than anything, I know that I have been gifted with, gab. And I know that my voice is powerful. And I know that there are some people who do not know how to articulate it the same way. And again, when it comes down to privilege, how can I use my privilege to help the betterment of my people, period? So again, for me, I went through so many different spaces, and I'm grateful that I was allowed to grow, in my graduation speech in law school, since I was in the I was in the Indian legal program originally, and then I ended up kind of going to science and some other things. So
let's backtrack for a moment. Indian legal program.
Mm-hmm.
Never heard of it.
Okay, so I was at Caldwell University, and I was in my last year, and I was graduating with a degree in business and a focus on music law, or I think music business or something. And so I spoke to a professor, a Black woman at Caldwell, who's a lawyer. And I just, was explaining to her what my purpose or what I felt my purpose was. And she's like, well, what kind of law do you want to go into? And I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, well, what law school do you want to go to? She went to Harvard. So I was like, Harvard or Columbia, where my mom went. And she's like, yeah, but what kind of law are you going into? And I'm like, oh, there's different levels. Oh, I didn't even know there are different areas. I knew there was different areas, but I didn't know specifically. And so she gave me an assignment. The next day I went and I found ASU, and ASU has the best program in the nation for Indian legal or Indian law. It's specifically for law that pertains to Native Americans and our sovereignty, our water rights, and that we're considered dependents of the state, of the country. And our that was just a mind-blowing experience. It really propelled me into the space of knowing that we are really not free, none of us. And so, when people think that oh, Native Americans get free school and all this other stuff, it comes at a price, And so while my tribe does pay for school, and my tribe did pay for my schooling, and I'm so grateful for that. At the same time, when it comes down to Indian law, how can we protect ourselves in the future? How do we protect our culture? How do we protect our cultural rights, our property rights? The law doesn't pertain to us the same way. Where you, as an American citizen, can't be tried for double jeopardy. You can't be tried twice for the same crime. For Native Americans, we can be tried thrice, if that were a word. When it comes down to if a crime has, if a criminal act has occurred on the reservation, depending on if it's my tribe or if I'm visiting another person's tribe, I can be tried by or prosecuted by the state, by the tribe itself, and then by the federal government. And I can be convicted of all three arenas. So jurisdiction-wise, I'm more available to serve time for the same crime multiple times.
So as a person who, is Native and also works, in the field of law, how do you combat those issues, not only within your tribe, but as a representative of the Native and Indigenous people, period?
Well, the thing is, we only know what we know until we know otherwise. So for me, it's more like I was able to experience this interesting experience called law school. And other than the PTSD that I'm dealing with currently, other than that, I inform others. I give them the information, whether I love playing games with my children, for instance. And so with my children, when we have family meetings, we have court hearings. And to avoid them not being accountable, I teach them why the law is important. And I teach them why it's based on our morals and based on our values. So for me, it's more like, how can we educate ourselves? And for me, I take the opportunity to volunteer. And I also play games with other people's kids, not like that, but, but, play games as far as like, just playing games on the law and making sure these children really know the Constitution and what it really means to us. And so, yeah, for me, it's just being a channel for information.
So, okay, it's one thing to be Black, right? Another thing to be a woman. What is it like to be Black and Native?
Well, I can't speak for other people, I can only speak for me. But from other, what I like to call Blendians or Afro-Native, Afro-Indigenous, it is hard. We are in two very different cultures. On one end, being Black is hard enough. And being educated and Black is super, super hard. And it propels you into a different space when you're educated. And being Native, it's kind of like the reservation's like a big old trailer park. Or sometimes it's not like that, but it's a small community and everybody's related. And you have a lot of family feuds that last for generations. You have a lot of generational trauma that continues to get passed down. People don't do a lot of self-healing or even acknowledge that they need to go to counseling or to be treated for just their trauma. And that becomes people's norm. And so for me, growing up between New York City, New Jersey, in the summer or winter, being on the res or being in Alabama where my mom's family's from, it's a lot. It's a lot of code switching. It's a lot of, going back and forth. And sometimes that dichotomy or the duplicity can cause confusion as far as, cultural identity. But I've always embraced both sides. And for me, being on my mom's side, it was like, well, you're always like, the lighter person or having the good hair. And so that's one space. And then being on my father's side, even though I'm not even that dark, being Black is being Black. And so I'd always had to answer, well, how does it feel being Black? And I'm like, well, I've never not been Black, so I'm not really sure how I should feel. And then two, that's, when it comes down to it, I am who I am. And I am very just grateful that I've had both cultures and that I'm still connected to being Native, because you don't run into a lot of Native Americans. Not
so to me, what I'm hearing is an oppressed people, that community still oppresses others.
Yeah.
Interesting. And because when I do see Indigenous people, it's always a fight, it's always a struggle. So one would think that they would be sensitive to those issues.
Right.
Now, what's the name of your tribe?
So I'm Eastern Band Cherokee. And so the difference between like Cherokee Nation, which most people are familiar with, which are the tribe in Oklahoma, they were removed. So the Trail of Tears and all that, you grew up hearing in history class, if you've been privileged enough to have that as a lesson. But my specific tribe, we are the descendants of the people who hid in the mountains or fought. We were the resistance. So with me and my tribe, we are on our original land. We bought our land back, and my grandmother, for instance, she is the one of the tribal elders. She is a beloved woman of the tribe, and she recently translated Charlotte's Web into Cherokee. So we have a few like fluent speakers, and my brother currently works at the Kadua Academy, which is an immersion program that starts from like, I guess, infant all the way, I think they're into 6th grade now, where people only speak Cherokee throughout the day. And my aunt actually is the founder of that school. So, you know, in my family, culture is really big. And so, again, when it comes to oppression and, you know, combating against that, you know, it's the difference between being, I would say, African-American and Native. It's like this. When it comes down to it, it's like if one of us, you or I, were to go to Africa, which is a continent, and, you know, just pick some random country and be like, we're home, you know, it's displacement. And without culture, without history, without language, you lose a part of yourself. And so that's the biggest difference between being Native and being African-American per se. Because for me, being Native, there is no lost connection. You know, I have language, I have my family, I have the stories, I have our medicine, I have, again, our language. And that's really important. And then being Black, you know, being an American Black, we are a culmination of so many things. So even being Black, the term, doesn't really describe us.
Right, right. So I have quite a few friends who have gone to law school and gone on to become lawyers. None of them became judges except you. So I'm just wondering how that came about, because like I said, I looked up, you were in law school, you graduated, and then you were a freaking judge.
So, you know,
talk
honestly,
about trajectory.
Yeah, honestly. So after law school, I was kind of lost because, you know, again, I've only done the music thing for forever. And so actually having a consistent job and, you know, all of that has been new to me. You know, being a mom of 4 and taking them with me to law school was hard. And so during COVID, I sat home with them. I wasn't able to work. So aside from becoming the lunch lady, the hall monitor, the principal, the substitute teacher,
chauffeur.
Yeah, all like no, it wasn't even a chauffeur because remember we were quarantined. So True. I had to deal with all the online schooling, and that was interesting. So I sat for a year, no job, no nothing. And like the depression was real. You know, I lost a lot of weight. I was happy. However, you know, my body wasn't, my mind wasn't, my soul wasn't. And so I got out of a horrible relationship. And again, I just sat. I really took some time for myself to just meditate, to cry, to grieve, to really feel all the things that as people, when we're doing too much, we don't feel anything. And so that was my first moment of just sitting and, you know, and talking to my children and really engaging. And so prior to COVID, they would call me judge, you know, because I'm so very judgmental and mostly of myself, of my standards, my requirements. But they would call me judge. And so I called myself judge. I like to draw. So just drawing through my feelings. You know, I was like, I want to be less judgmental, but again, they call me Judge Climbingbear. And so after that relationship ended, and she actually called me Judge Climbingbear. She had that saved in her phone. And so just talk about manifesting. Yes, my ex. So
oh my goodness. Okay.
So talk about manifesting. So she put it in there, Judge, Honorable Judge, wife, Climbingbear, or Kyra Climbingbear, Esquire. And so as soon as that relationship was over, again, I prayed, I sat, and I had got hired as for a firm for intellectual property. And I was not happy at those terms and conditions because I said one number and they said a different number, and they agreed with my number at first. But then when they hit me with the offer letter, it was not the same number. So I was like, this is not gonna work for me. And they rescinded the contract, which was fine. They rescinded the offer. And literally 3 days later, this job pops up on Indeed, and I apply on every platform. And it was through a staffing agency. And I'm like, all right, cool, I'm gonna try. And literally after I interviewed 2 days later on the weekend, I got a call that said I got the job. So, for me, God is everything. God provides. And when you are destined for certain things, God is going to give you tests. And I definitely felt the whole distraction. I was like, what? Relationship? We said we want to focus on me? Not today. Relationship. So, I pushed myself back. And as soon as I let that go, and as soon as I allowed for myself to be an instrument, so yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the past relationship, because I wasn't going to, but I just wanted to make sure you were in a space where you could discuss it. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
You were married at 20. You have 4 children. Now, would you say that you identify as a lesbian?
Definitely. Honestly, so funny story, which all of them are really funny, because I'm like, how is this my life in real life?
Right.
But so I was a late bloomer. Growing up in a certain household, I was brought up as a Baha'i. So we believe in one world, one people. But of course, in the teachings, homosexuality is a no. And with my grandmother being a very traditional Cherokee woman, homosexuality is a no. So when I came out at 15, my mom was like, no, you're not gay. You're bisexual, and never, ever act on it. And I'm like, okay. For all the things that I don't listen to, that was the one I'm like, okay, I'm gonna listen to that one. So I didn't act on it. I didn't experiment. I just was like, okay, well, I guess I'm a straight woman, or, bisexual or bi-curious. And so after being married and after having 3 really long relationships with men and having children with them, I realized, one, I love long-term relationships. I'm a serial monogamous person. But for me, the emotional connection with men was just non-existent. Like, I pretty much am very aggressive, and I end up attracting both masculine and a little more feminine men. And then I realized I prefer feminine men. I prefer a certain build, a certain phenotype, all types of stuff. And then when I met my partner at the time, I felt love for the very first time for me. I was like all the way in love. And I was really excited that my family was so, so supportive. But I will say, my children, when I decided to come out to them, and I had like a whole panic attack, I was like, oh my God, they're gonna my kids were just like, yeah, have you not seen our fathers? And I was just like, oh, so you guys knew I was gay? Like, wow, no one wanted to fill me in. I feel like, wow. So everybody knew the secret. No one wanted to say, hey, Mom, I think you might be gay. So yeah, so that was new for me. And yeah, it was an experience. I will say that dating women is real. It is a whole ball game. I still have not got the rules yet. I'm still waiting for my welcome to lesbian packet. Apparently, I don't know. I'm not sure if they got the right mailing address, but yeah, that has been interesting.
But I love that for you, because like I said, I've always, from the outside looking in, just seen you as like this beautiful, feminine, artsy, and you're still all of those things, but to see you step into your truth, I mean, that's really amazing. So, I think you're the second guest speaker that we've had during this workshop who she, started off dating men. She had a child. She became a police officer, and she fell in love with someone on the force, and that became her life partner. So yeah. I just, it's important for me, for young women, especially the members that we have here in the squad who are, still learning and growing. They're still figuring it out. Yeah. Right. There's no right or wrong way to be and to do it and to figure it out. And if you do have certain feelings, you should probably, navigate those waters and see what that means for you.
You have to figure it out. Honestly, it's like, again, being a parent of 4 children. There are moments when I'm like, my kids tell me things. I'm like, no, that's not true. You're this or you're that. And I'm like, no, I have no right to tell them who they are, 1. And then 2, let them figure it out. That's the whole point of us living. This is a social experiment, but it's an experience. And again, for me, I did the route of all the way having my children. My tribe can never say I didn't populate or add additional members. My family can't say that I didn't, pass on my last name, because all my children have my last name, even when I was married. Again, I guess I should have known that I'm a whole force. And all my children are pretty much named after me to some degree. So, yeah, like I have done my duty, and I do not feel that I owe anyone else anything. I even got a whole law degree for my mother and for my family and for my tribe. And I can honestly say I didn't go to law school for me. That was not something that my ego needed. That was something that, for me, how can I protect my tribe from itself? When it comes down to bad leadership, or when it comes down to mismanaged funds, what can I do that is going to propel my tribe into a better space? And again, how do I protect our future? Because if no one else is thinking about it,
That leads me to my next question. How do you apply being a lawyer and a judge to the protection of, your people and your tribe?
So for me, let me get myself all comfortable, So for me, I have certifications in fashion law that I got from Fordham University. I have a certification in law, science, and technology with a focus in intellectual property. And again, I have not a specialty, but definitely a focus in Indian law. And so for me, I think about the gamut. I think about in the future, for instance, intellectual property. So intellectual property normally affords for copyrights for 70 years, and for trademarks, et cetera, patents, right? But when it comes down to Indian law, again, our laws are different. So we have the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. However, that does not protect against certain intellectual property. It doesn't protect if, let's say, a native artist has an idea and they print it out on a 3D printer. It's not protected, because technically the Indian Arts and Crafts Act only applies when it's a traditional handmade item. So I'm like, well, hold up. How does that, how can we then make sure that tribes are really protecting their creations? Like, for instance, intellectual property has been practiced by natives. Like when it comes to totem poles are very sacred to that individual tribe. And it represents their clan, it represents their family. Their family owns that image. They owns the way that the totem pole is designed, as far as like each character or each animal. It has a specific meaning to that family. And so again, when you see these little designs on somebody's t-shirt or something like that, that technically is someone's copyrighted work. Again, natives have been doing this since the beginning of time. And other tribes understood that you don't make those same marks because they're not yours to make. And so, again, I don't know if you watched Westworld that was on, what was it, HBO or Showtime?
I heard of it. I didn't watch it, but I heard of it.
So Westworld is a thing on robots, and you can go inside to this place, and you can interact with these different robots, and it's a Western kind of vibe, right? However, on the skull of these robots, where they, someone's been killing the robots or whatever. And so when they look at the skull, there is a man in the maze. That man in the maze pattern is actually from tribes out here. Oh, that's my mother. I'm gonna ignore her. and that goes to Salt River. That goes to Pima Maricopa. That goes to the Tohono O'odham. That goes to Gila River. So that is actually their sacred story of the man in the maze. And it's talking about how man was created. That's their creation story. But, but Westworld didn't give anything to that tribe, to any of those tribes. And they don't even give credit to those tribes. So really what it comes down to is, how can we protect our creation stories? And that, again, that doesn't just apply to natives, that applies to other indigenous peoples, period. So for me, I intentionally changed my career direction to include intellectual property, because Indian law focuses on the past. The issue that I find within those communities is that we're not thinking about the modernization. We're not thinking about the present. if we're not thinking about the present, we can't possibly think about the future because we're stuck in one space. And that's a space that has been allotted to us by the government. But now that there are other Indian lawyers and other Indian judges, you know, how can we propel ourselves into a space where not only are we generating income, but we are protecting our future assets and we're educating our children. So yeah, so for me, again, being in this position as a judge, it kind of just, again, gives me just hope for myself and hope for our future. Like, wow, like I did not see this coming for myself. And so now to be in this space, again, I'm just blessed. And I'm like, how can I better serve my people? Because this is not just for me.
So you know what? In terms of, political correctness, I hear you switch from Native to Indian. Mm-hmm. Are we allowed to do that as non-Native people?
So
I've always wondered.
So Native American is like politically correct for like English if you're writing something, but as far as actual legal terms, American Indian is actually the legal term because in the Constitution we are referred to as Indians. So just by those definitions, we are still Indian. And then when our tribes became incorporated, because again, we're still an entity, we're still a business entity, they use the words that were on those constitutions. So we're technically Indian.
How does that work? How is it and why is it that tribes can be judged more harshly than a typical like American citizen? Outdated laws, like
it's outdated laws. It's outdated laws. Yeah. So those outdated laws were in place to, again, preserve our culture or preserve our relationship with the United States based on those treaties that we signed. And I always laugh in law school because I'm like, well, hold up, hear me out. How can we be held to contracts that the people who signed them were not mentally capable of contracting? I mean, between language barriers and again, just general understandings, you know, it's kind of like that whole thing of being an Indian giver, right? So in most people's perception, being an Indian giver means I gave you something and I took it back and I didn't have a right to take it back. But really what that comes from is that non-natives or, you know, European settlers came over and they made lots of agreements with natives and they didn't uphold those agreements. So depending on the tribe, they went back and took their stuff. Like the agreement is done. You breached the contract. That's how that works. You didn't hold up on your end of the bargain. So I'm going to take my stuff back. That's how that should work. But that's where the term Indian giver comes from. And again, because those laws are outdated, we unfortunately are just suffering. We're suffering from those outdated laws. And most tribes aren't in the space to legally fight the United States. So they want to deal with it. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. So another really awesome thing that you've done that I feel like people listening in right now could benefit from is the fact that, you know, you're from the tri-state area, but you moved, all the way to Arizona for law school?
Yeah.
So how do you, because a lot of people are afraid to move, they're afraid to leave their families. How do you just, you know, take that leap of faith, so to speak?
So I moved all the way to Arizona with no law school acceptance letter, no nothing. I only applied to one law school. So the odds on that are just ridiculous anyway. But I just trusted myself, you know, like honestly, I went to the Institute of Audio Research when it was still in business in New York. And my tribe paid for that. And they had never paid for a program like that. So I had to write a really compelling, you know, letter on why they should sponsor me or pay for it. And I just always have moved on faith, you know, like I don't really have that. I don't really have that, like, I won't say fear because, you know, I definitely am fearful for plenty of things. And I have lots of anxiety, you know, but for me, when it comes down to just my purpose, whatever God got for me, I'm here for it. So like, I just pray on it. And if everything lines up for it, I'm like, well, God has shown me all the signs, or again, the creator, the universe, whomever you subscribe to, I just feel like, again, when I prayed on it, it's been provided for me. So I take that leap, because if I don't take that leap for myself, who else is going to? You know,
Right.
like I'm always like with my mom, and again, old Black sayings, my mom will say, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And it's the truth, a closed mouth cannot get fed, because one is not telling itself what it needs. It's not processing by actually speaking it out loud. And then thirdly, if your mouth is closed, you can't eat unless you, of course, are intubated or something. But again, you have to open your mouth and you have to ask for what you need, and then you have to start making the moves to then eat, or at least then cook, or whatever the case may be. But you have to decide what you're going to do, and whatever is for you is going to be for you. And again, you can't move in a space that you're afraid. You will hinder yourself in some type of way, whether you self-sabotage or whether you never take that leap at all. But really, the first movement comes from you, and then everything else will line up. So I drove my family all the way across country in 3 days. And I didn't know that I actually got accepted until the day classes started. And it was amazing.
Yeah. So. And all of this is very refreshing to hear, because I know for a fact that a lot of people listening in have these same concerns, whether it be culturally or just stepping out on faith. So you really make it look so easy. You say you have fears and anxieties, but you seem so fearless. And so it's, again, like super refreshing to hear.
I appreciate that. I'm honored. This is not the first time that I heard, someone say how it just seems so easy, and it seems, that I do things without like real effort. But I did not get diagnosed until I was 33 with ADHD. And even though my mom's a therapist, I told my mom, I knew I had ADD for a long time. And again, I didn't get diagnosed until I was in law school and failing. Like I was failing. Like you can't even, let me tell you, a C is a fail in law school. That's a fact. And so for me, I have struggled. I take a lot longer to study. I take a lot longer to write a decision as a judge. I take a lot, I like to move. So for me, once I'm done something, I start moving around, and then I'm processing, I'm processing the information. It's easier for me to talk to my children and give them a story so I can process the information. So I had to find techniques that work for me as a person who has a mental health issue, who has a biological deficiency. And again, I would have not really known these things had I stayed in New Jersey, had I stayed in New York, because the doctors I spoke to, they didn't really think that. And I came out here and I spoke to a specialist, and she's like, oh yeah, no, you definitely have ADD. And it was done. And then, having that diagnosis didn't propel me into a better space. What it did was it gave me more anxiety, but it also made it make sense. And then I had to find new things that helped me. So again, it's more like stepping on a faith.
At least you had an answer.
Yeah. And once you have an answer, again, you can then adjust. So for me, again, studying, being smart has not been easy, especially growing up in a home or in a community where being smart is a problem. Being smart as a Black woman is a problem,
because it translates sometimes to smart mouth or an attitude when really you're just advocating for yourself.
Or really you're asking a question.
Or asking a question.
Right. And so, and so again, growing up in a space where, in my generation, which I'm still technically a millennial, but ask my kids, they'll say I'm a boomer. Growing up in a space where it's not easy being a smart Black woman or a smart person, period. It's not easy being a person who likes science and who's geeky, So those are things that I really would like for our communities to really start just really embracing being intelligent and thinking outside the box and being different and being creative. And if you're not creative, again, being smart, finding what works for you. And so for me, that's what I've been focusing on with my children, finding what works for them and teaching based on how they process,
We have some questions in the chat that we're going to move to. So we have a question from actually the director of the Women's Center, Southong, and she asks, How do you feel about land acknowledgements before meetings, whether it is superficial or meaningful?
I personally feel it's pretty superficial. I feel like when it comes down to it, realistically, acknowledging acknowledging that something is ours, but then not giving any compensation for it, or really more importantly, giving it back, doesn't matter. It's kind of like if I stole something from you, and let's say I stole your earrings, or you let me borrow your earrings, and then I never gave them back. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, the earrings you gave me, I'm still wearing, but you're not entitled to them. Or, it's, for me, it's more like, I really appreciate the strides that people are making to become more politically correct. And I appreciate the strides that people are making to really understand other people's trauma and understand their oppression. But at the same time, if we're not offering a solution, then what's the point? Really?
Agreed. And it almost seems like the moment that you want to surpass that level of just being acknowledged, it becomes a fight.
Right. Or it becomes, people really should get over things. I mean,
yeah.
Right. I mean, that happened so long ago. I mean, granted, you're still suffering from all of the aftermath, but you guys gotta have to really get past that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Definitely. People don't want to do the work to it goes past just acknowledging.
Yeah.
Or just acknowledgement.
Or just even, my thing is put us in a space where we are given real free education as people of color who have, again, our ancestors definitely worked for free. And again, if you want to compensate us with education, compensate us with a level playing field so that we can have more doctors and more lawyers and more people exposed to better education. Give us that. And then do not, try to have us pay back things that we're entitled to.
Absolutely. We have another question in the chat from...
Grab some coffee. I'm listening.
Yeah, no worries. Go ahead, grab your coffee. I'll wait till you come back.
I'm still here.
You must be so tired, Kyra. I mean,
honestly,
it's a balancing act.
It's I have not slept in years. Mom.
No, literally, I don't think I've slept since the day I gave birth. So.
Hold on one second, I didn't hear that.
So it's 3 years of no sleep.
I haven't slept since my oldest was born. I think it's 16 years.
Yeah, so it's almost 2 decades for you. My goodness, you must be a vampire by now.
It's all questionable after this.
So let's see. But you can hear me okay, so I'll just shoot the question to you. How about that?
That works.
Okay, so Karina wants to know, how has Native American culture changed over the years? And I think that's a really awesome question that I never considered. Have you seen the evolution or de-evolution of Native culture?
So I will say, when I first started visiting my dad on our reservation, I was like, oh God. We didn't have, we had one grocery store, which we still do technically, but there are more grocery stores outside the boundary. And it was ghetto. I was like, oh God. I was like, Mom, you're not because I came from privilege. My mom is a whole therapist. So I went to boarding school. I had a nanny at some point growing up. I've had privilege. And so I was like, we're in a hood now. And so going to the res, my father, like most of the natives, either has a prefabricated house that's on a plot of land that we own. But again, even that is questionable because the land is technically in reserve. That's why it's called a reservation. But the land is actually held in trust by the United States, and so we are tax exempt. But at a time, we didn't have a casino. We didn't have anything. Most of the members were surviving off of welfare and food stamps and things of that nature. And the racism was ridiculous. I remember I had really long hair, and you can't really tell, but my hair is really curly, and it's
amazing hair.
Yeah, oh, I love my hair. It's like Khalees, or Tayana Taylor. I'm not sure if that's really her hair. Well, no, actually, I think it is. Either way, it's that texture. And so in being Black, that's like good hair. Being Native, that's like you're Black. So we don't know what that is. And so my stepmother would take me out and my hair would be all big and bushy. And I remember some Native lady following me in the store, like following me. I was a whole kid and she just was pointing at me, and her white husband was also staring at me. And so I remember my stepmom, spazzed out about it. And since then, growing up, there weren't a lot of Blendians like me. And so when we did find, when I had cousins who were Native and Black, we'd stick together. And so it is a subculture in that culture. And so now I have seen a lot more Natives that are mixed with Black. So I'm like, yes, Blendians, we want to come up, we want to rise. But then at the same time, I can appreciate the fact that we do have a casino now. And because we have a casino, it has
talk about that, because I hear all the time, I hear a lot of things about Native people, but I know for a fact that there's some type of correlation between casinos and Natives getting benefits or not from those casinos. So what does that look like, that whole world?
Okay, so not every tribe has a casino, and not every tribe is federally recognized. Some are state recognized. And so the difference between a state recognized tribe and a federal recognized tribe is that for state, it's, okay, we recognize that you're Native. We recognize that you're Indigenous. You don't have any land in reserve, and you are not. You're not entitled to federal grants. You may get state benefits, but you're not going to get federal benefits. And so, again, because our land is in trust, we are tax exempt. So that means, just like a university, a tribe and a business. Let's just say Trump, Trump's business, being in the casino business, he will then, that company will then reach out to a tribe and say, hey, we want to build a casino and we want to use your land. And that will generate income for you. And then your tribal members will get an allocation of that money. And again, because it's tax exempt, it is a business venture and a profitable business adventure for a non-native or a non-native business, because again, they're now tax exempt and that saves them money. So we get the per capita from it, which is usually allocated 2 times or 3 times a year, depending on your tribe, because like there are plenty of casinos out here and the tribes here have plenty of benefits from those casinos. But the problem with that is that because you can't give people money that they have never had. The problem with that is that the drugs, the opioid issue is very, very, very severe.
And the alcohol issue as well.
So the alcoholism, we used to have a ban that we couldn't sell liquor on tribal land. That has been since lifted and amended for many tribes because the casinos need liquor. Liquor sales are ridiculous. So of course they're not gonna have that in place, even though it still affects us. Our genetics are different. Liquor is not our friend. But yeah.
And they're called spirits for a reason, and that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole exactly.
But let's go back. I'm going to go back to the chat because we have a few more questions. Just give me one moment. Okay, so Salfong asks if you can talk about the systemic similarities or the disparities between Native people and African Americans. Do they look different?
So yeah, that's a tough one. Honestly, in certain spaces, I would say it looks different, but really when it comes down to it, oppression is oppression. Generational trauma is generational trauma. Whether I would say they don't look that different. When it comes down to it, it's a lot of generational trauma. It is so much generational trauma, and that crab in a barrel kind of, kind of behavior that a lot of people of color experience from other Black people, especially when you are educated, or especially if you're a certain, color or hue, especially if you speak a certain way. We have those type of same similarities in Native culture, where the more educated you become, the more distant people are with you, the more unwelcome you are in your community. And so again, it is horrible. It's horrible being a mixed person in certain spaces, because again, people think that, you're only around for the benefits. And again, I was here before the benefits, and trust me, the benefits don't outweigh some of the harsh realities.
And the struggles.
The struggle is real. It is very real. But I will say, the thing I can really, 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 really find peace in is the fact that other educated natives will go out their way well beyond, when it comes down to helping other natives. And I can really appreciate that about our culture. When I went to law school, I was told that, and this was by a mentor and by a supervisor, that when I was telling her my story about why I was in law school, she's like, well, what about you? And I'm like, what about me? And she's like, well, what about your own personal needs? And I'm like, well, my tribe paid for my school. So for me, I owe them. I'm obligated. And even if I'm not legally obligated, in my soul, I'm obligated because out of all of the communities that I belong to, that has been the one that has been the most supportive and has had my back. And so regardless of the struggles of maintaining scholarships or getting work in or whatever the case may be, my tribe has stood by me. And so I can say that in the Black community, it has not been the same. In the Black community, it has been very much like, I'm only going to give you so much information as long as you don't do better than me.
Well, also, I don't even know that we have the resources like your tribe. There's nowhere I can go that's going to pay for my PhD. Yeah. I mean, if I got married to a Native person, would I get his benefits?
So you wouldn't get the benefits, but your child would. And it depends on the tribe. And again, it depends on the tribe, because there are some very famous cases where a Native American who was full blood, because we use those terms, who was full Native, wasn't technically Native by law, because they were half one tribe and then half the other tribe. And in their mother's tribe, you had to be
100%
by the father. No, by the father.
Oh, by the it was so almost like that one drop rule.
Right, but the problem was then with the father's tribe, it had to be through the mother. So the person was displaced, and they were not technically entitled to anything. So so that's an issue too. And again, colorism is an issue in Native American culture. It's a lot of just things that were never our concepts, including the one drop rule that you just mentioned. When it comes to blood quantum is based on each tribe. My tribe has a blood quantum of only 1/16. Other tribes like Navajo, I believe that you have to be at least 1/4. But Navajo is one of the largest tribes in the nation, and they do not get the same type of benefits because they have so many members. But it really depends on each tribe. And again, if you were to marry into a tribe, someone who is tribally affiliated, it would depend. But for instance, with my tribe, if the person who I'm with or whatever, who I'm married to, they would then be entitled to first having priority for job selection. So the tribe would choose them over someone who was non-Native, who did not have any affiliation with the tribe. So there are some perks.
Okay. We have Christy in the chat. She has one question. Okay. Or a question rather.
Yeah.
Hey, Christy.
So first of all, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing your journey with us. After hearing this, my one question is, how did you know that you were on the right path for yourself? Because going from an artist to becoming a judge is pretty different. So how did you know? Was it like a feeling? Did you get a sign?
So I've had lots of signs along the way. Honestly, I'm the exception of the rule all the time. I'm the underdog, and I'm always counted out. And so for me, because I'm so persistent, if something does not line up, then I'll just say, well, let me try one more time. And if that still doesn't line up, I'm like, well, I guess that wasn't for me. That wasn't meant for me. And then I pray on it. And then I like to make decisions based on the morning when I'm the most clear and the most cognizant, when I've had time to rest. And for me, I'm big on dreams. And in my culture, we're big on dreams, you know, the messages you get in those dreams. And in my dreams, I've had messages of when I would have a child, when I wasn't even pregnant or trying. And then I have known, you know, I've just had a feeling that like my children will be coming soon, even if I, again, wasn't pregnant or didn't know I was pregnant. And so it's kind of been like that kind of same premonition where I sleep on it. I sleep on a decision, or I just sleep on information. And then I pray. And then when I wake up, everything kind of just, you know, all my cogs are turning and I have an answer. And so for me, going to law school, I spoke it into existence. I said it was gonna happen, and I kept making those moves and those strides toward that. And it just so happened that one day I was out here in Arizona for a business, American Indian business leaders, right? And they sponsored me, and I came out here to Arizona. It's my second time out here in Arizona. And the first time I was out here, I was performing as an artist. I had gotten invited to the Native American Basketball Invitational thing. And I sung at what is now called the Talking Stick Arena. And I promised myself that I would move out here. And I had just had my second baby. She was literally 9 months old, and she traveled with me to Arizona, and it was 114 degrees outside. And I was like, I'm gonna come back here. I'm gonna live here. This is my stop. I'm like, I got this. And again, my daughter was 9 months at the time. When we moved here, she was then I want to say 6, or I believe 6, because now she's 11. She's going to be 12 soon. And I, you know, talked to her about me taking her and how I had to breastfeed her in between my set of performing as an artist, and then coming here for a total different thing when I was in my undergrad. And as I'm at this conference for American Indian business leaders, right, which has now changed their name to American, I believe, Indigenous business leaders, I was on the online chapter. I wasn't even a part of the group, to be honest. And so again, I wrote to them, said I wanted to come out, and then they decided to sponsor me, and they waived certain fees. And so while I was there, I was leaving that day. I was going to leave at like 2:00. And so I went to one of the last panels, and there was this guy, Dion Killsback, and a small little guy who, a native guy, long hair, and he was talking about the struggle was real. And I said, yes, it is. And so he said, you know, I'm a lawyer, and if anybody needs a reference letter or anything, make sure you hit me up after, you know, I'm done with my talk. So literally, as soon as he finished talking, I was like, hey, so remember that time that you mentioned how if anybody needs a reference letter? Well, I'm actually going to law school, and I need a reference letter. And he's like, well, when do you need to buy it? I'm like, I need to buy it like yesterday. So he said, well, I actually know the director of that program, of the Indian legal program. And I had been talking to her for a while, but she didn't really correspond that often with me because she was too busy. But she's friends with Mr. Killsback. And so Dion said, I got you. And 2 days later, he emailed the director of that program. And he emailed me. He never emailed me a copy of what he wrote, but it must have been impressive. And because of that, I ended up like definitely, you know, that was one of the signs that I knew I was on the right path, because everything lined up. And literally I got accepted. Like that wasn't even a whole 2 months later. So, you know, again, you will make those moves, and the universe will move around you. They will move, the universe will move with you, because you are not sitting still and waiting for someone to do it for you. You are putting into, you know, into the atmosphere, into the ether, into the universe, into whatever world that you have now created. You're putting into what you feel and believe that you deserve. And again, if it is meant for you, it's going to align. You got to have faith in you, you know?
Amazing. And you know what? I'm fortunate enough to be able to talk to you, I guess, like frequently.
Yeah.
And you know, but I'm so happy that you were able to speak today and, you know, drop some gems and jewels, and hopefully they were picked up, because
and
you
honestly,
have a plethora of information.
If anybody needs any, like, just, you know, information on how, or courage, or just a kind word, feel free to find me on Instagram, follow me,
Can I put your email in the chat?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What's your email?
Climbingbear@outlook.com.
Okay, so everyone, I'm putting Kyra's email in the chat if you have any questions you want to reach out to her. But we just want to thank you again at the Women's Center and at Brooklyn College. We really appreciate your time, and maybe we can do this again and build on this conversation of Indigenous people, because it's certainly interesting and also a topic that I feel like should have more awareness behind it.
Yeah. Thank you again. I'm just honored that you chose me and you reached out to me. I am so happy that we are, as women, coming into a different space and understanding that we are limitless. We are legit capable of anything and everything. And all we need is support. And so again, I am very, very grateful to you. I'm happy that I actually have had to, time to see you grow too. And I cannot wait to see what you produce in the world and where that goes. I'm excited to just be connected to you. So again, thank you. I appreciate you.
Likewise. Thank you so much, sis. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining. And excuse me, I see that let me just, before we head out, I'm going to put Kyra's email in the chat again. I just want to make sure I get this correct. And
again, if anybody needs any type of information on law school, let me know, because I had to find out the hard way. I Googled it. Just reach out, let me know, and I got you.
And also, squad members, when we chat, you guys can ask me anything about Kyra if you want to circle back if you have any more questions. All right.
Thank you again, Brie. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Okay, so I'm going to end the meeting now, everybody. Peace.
Peace. Thank you.